What's up, guys? It's Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to PXA Peeks at Herald, an interactive period drama. Yeah, title doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it? But this is an interesting thing. I got review code for this out of the day. It came out of the blue. I'd never heard of this game before. It was not on my radar at all. And I played through a quarter of it last night, effectively. And I'm not 100% sure yet if I like it or not, but it's very interesting and different from a lot of the things we see come out these days, which is why I wanted to talk about it, because I think maybe some of you guys would find it interesting. So this is a very Telltale-esque game, I'm going to say. It's pitched as an adventure game mixed with a visual novel, but it really just involves a lot of walking and talking and some very, very basic puzzle solving. And it's one of these games where it says that your choices will impact the story later. So it takes place in an alternate 19th century version of history where the West is actually a colonial superpower known as the Protectorate. So it's heavily inspired by history, but it isn't a direct parallel to that. There have been creative liberties taken with it. Comes to us from a small team in the Netherlands known as Wispfire. And yeah, there's some elements of this that really stand out to me and really caught my attention, but there's others that it's a little bit weaker in. So this is actually an episodic game. You can buy the first 2 episodes of it, or books as they're called, for $10 right now on Steam. There are 2 others that are going to be coming later at an unannounced time. So I finished the first book last night. Took me about 90 minutes. They say the average episode length is about 2 hours. So if this comes out to be $20 for around 8 hours of play, that's not bad. That's not bad. So I didn't want to spoil too much of this, so I have jumped past the immediate intro in a new game here, and we're going to start this off. So I'll probably let a good chunk of this intro sequence play out here so you can see. One thing that's very nice, this game is entirely voiced, and I'm going to let you hear this to get a bit of an idea of writing is like. And we'll sort of go on from there after this intro. I'll play through the sequence, and then we'll move on from there. So we're going to see the Herald come into view here. As far as I know, this entire game takes place on the ship. It is a very limited scope. Not a lot of environments, not a lot of variance necessarily. It's all about what happens on this ship. And you have to solve a lot of conflicts amongst the crew and eventually be tasked with solving a great mystery. I'll just leave it at that.
By God, Ludlow, have you read this?
No, sir, I haven't.
Your people seem to be causing a lot of unrest in the colonies lately.
My people, sir?
Well, you know.
I don't know, sir.
The indigo farmers, they claim the trade does not benefit them enough. They accuse the Lord Protector of abuse of power and demand fairer wages. The local regent has yet to respond, but I fear he will cave into the pressure.
Is that why we have the politician on board?
Yes. Senator Morton is the regent's brother-in-law, and he's going to help him with the complex politics of this affair. He's also accompanying the regent's daughter safely back to the colonies. Remember to treat both of them with respect.
Sir.
Is there anything else you brought from shore?
Well, apart from the new recruit, a letter, sir, addressed to Senator Morton.
Well, what are you waiting for? Give it to me.
But, sir, it's not your...
My ship, my rules, Ludlow. You know this. Besides, I don't think Mr. Morton has anything to hide from me. He better not.
May I remind you he is a Protectorate official, sir?
And so am I. You there. What do you think, boy? Should I open the letter or not?
Okay, and here we come to our first choice here. So I'm going to let this sequence play out, but you have seen the meat and potatoes of this game at this point, I'm going to say, at least based on my impressions of it so far. A lot of conversation, a lot of choices.
Don't open it, sir. It's none of your business, and the Protectorate won't like it.
Really now? But what if it's important? What if it's something I need to know in order to keep the peace among the crew and passengers? I am the captain after all, and I have the responsibility to know everything. You should remember that, Mr.
Devon Rensburg, sir. Pleased to meet you, Captain.
Captain Cornelius Hendricks. Nice to have you aboard the Herald. Rensburg. I assume you understand that there are rules here. Officer Ludlow will give you the lowdown on them during your tour of the ship.
Sir, I have other...
But first, Ludlow, I'd like you to find Senator Morton and send him here. I need to talk to him about his letter of his. Be quick about it. I'll send Rensburg after you in a moment.
Yes, sir. Be sure to see me on deck, Devon.
So then, Rensburg, I take it you must be returning home to your family?
Yes, I am, sir. It feels strange to say that, though, since I don't really remember my family. I was adopted. I know my father is a Protectorian, and my mother is originally from the colonies. It won't be easy to find them. That's why I'm writing everything that might help me with my search down in my journal.
Yes. Yes, I see. Well, you should look at my globe then, Rensburg. As you see, the colonies are very big. You should write it in your journal. Well, off you go to your tour of the ship. Have a nice evening.
So yes, as you can tell, this is a very fancy empire. Oh, yes, indeed. So there is, like I said, this is an alternate version of history where the West runs basically a global empire. It is a very, very big, big thing that this group is involved in, and the political intrigues of that empire and its structure supposedly come into play over the course of the game. So. This is that what you saw there was the meat and potatoes of this. You do walk around and you do look at stuff like you would in a traditional adventure game, but this is a very minor point of it, at least in the first episode. There's not really been anything I would consider puzzles. There is an inventory, but it's really just been for the purpose of carrying items from one place to another. You basically walk around the ship, talk to people, and I'm just going to skip through this here now. But you basically walk around the ship, talk to people, try to solve problems, and try to, in many ways, keep the peace, as you'll discover later on. And that's kind of the bulk of it. Now, that's not necessarily all that different from a Telltale game, and some of those have been some of the most revered games in recent years, right? That's not necessarily a problem. Really, what it is what it comes down to is, does their story have enough compelling elements to it to justify the time in between where you're going to be walking around and doing stuff or talking to people? So far, I would say generally yes, especially for the price. It's been... It is definitely... There are elements of this that have been hit and miss for sure. So, one thing I said before that I liked about this is that it is all fully voice acted. And that's pretty awesome for a small indie game. I think that's really impressive. Now, in terms of the quality of the writing and the voice acting, it as I've said, it is a little hit and miss. Some of the voice actors are quite good. Some of them are definitely not so. And the one thing I find with the voice direction in this is that everything is very... It sounds very exaggerated, you know, like everyone is really overdoing their enunciation for dramatic effect. Like while it's good dialogue, they don't really talk the way average people would talk, right? They talk like they're acting is the only way I can put it. You know, it just feels a little overdone in some cases. It's not bad. Believe me, there's been way worse, especially in indie games. But it's quite good. It's quite serviceable and it's quite good. I really like, in terms of production values as well, I really like these portraits of the characters when they're talking. There's no lip syncing or lip movement, but I don't really think that's necessary. You know, they do emote a little bit. Sometimes they emote in kind of a Telltale way where their faces move to a bit of an exaggerated degree. It looks a little strange. But overall, I really like it, especially because it's this interesting, like, painted look that they have, right? It looks like they're 3D animated, hand-painted objects, which I think is really interesting. In terms of the 3D elements of the game, it's less impressive. I really like the colorful art style. I like how the colors really pop. There's a lot of contrast. You know, even if you look at the colors of the Protectorate here, which you see very heavily in this game, you know, it's this blue and gold thing. There's a lot of real contrast, and it makes everything very distinctive, and it really leaps out. I like that. But the graphics are also somewhat low fidelity, or at least texture-wise, they're fairly low fidelity, and the animation quality is pretty poor, to be honest with you. It is very rigid, very stiff. Again, to be honest with you, it kind of looks like Telltale games, but the one thing I've been railing on Telltale for years is that their engine is incredibly dated and needs to be replaced. Telltale animations look downright embarrassing in this generation, and the animations in this are not necessarily much better. The characters have, you know, they move, everything moves very, very stiff. When they're trying to emote or reach for something or things like that, it looks very old, to be honest with you. And I mean, this is a much smaller indie game. I wouldn't necessarily hold the production value standards to it that I would for a Walking Dead or something of that nature. But it's definitely noticeable, and you can definitely tell that it's not a state-of-the-art setup. In addition, this game runs on Unity, so you've probably seen a lot of hitching and screen stuttering in that. Yep, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Unity might be a great engine for developers, but it's a lousy engine from the consumer perspective. Unity games perform way too poorly for how dated they look, and this one's no exception. It generally runs at 60, but I'm playing this on a GTX 1080 that, according to its temperature readout right now, is barely stressed at all, and yet it stutters and hitches on a regular basis. So, not really a fan of that either. But this is not a high-paced action game. This isn't a game principally centered around dialogue, so, you know, is it the end of the world? No, but at the same time, you know, you probably should expect a little better for that, given how it looks. So,
I don't really like the color.
But you're really seeing the bulk of it here. Like, I don't want to play too far into this, because if this is the kind of game that interests you, I don't want to spoil it, right? You can talk to basically anyone in the world, but the only people who are voiced are the people who are principal characters in the story. Other people may say things to you, but it will usually be one or two sentences, and it just pops up in a little dialogue balloon on the screen. It doesn't go to this level of detail there, so it makes it very obvious who you have to talk to. And as I said in this first episode, all I really had to do in terms of quests or puzzles was fetch some items and bring them to other people. That was kind of it. There's one section where you have to move a couple of objects in order to find something that's hidden, but you're told the room to do it in, and all but pointed directly at it. It's that elements of the gameplay is really secondary. Everything is really centered around these conversations and dialogue. So, and it's interesting. Like, what I like about this is the setting. There are very few games that take place in this era. Most of the games that do take place, you know, on the high seas from a couple of centuries ago are usually about being a swashbuckling pirate. That is not the case here. You know, you are actually on a merchant ship of some repute. You are representing the protectorate that you work with. You're dealing with some very important people. You're having to talk to some very important people and solve problems for them. You know, this is definitely not your typical old school seafaring game, which I like. I also like the fact that they've chosen to take some creative liberties with this. It's definitely based on a version of the 19th century. You know, this is not a version of the 19th century. It's not steampunk. It's not some version of the 19th century where we discovered computing power 200 years early or something like that. You know, there's clearly a lot of true history roots in this thing. The game also claims to deal with matters of, you know, race and class, which were obviously very core things or core concerns, I guess you could say, back in that era. I hope it doesn't get too preachy about that, trying to make a lot of modern analogs or something like that. I will say in the first episode that has very much not been the case. The game has acknowledged that there were obvious massive inequities with race and class back in this era, which is absolutely true. but it doesn't turn that into a sermon or a lecture, which is very good. I don't like games that lecture me. I don't like games that try to use their what is put out as an interesting adventure game story to preach an agenda to me. This is very much not what this game is doing. So if you have concerns about that, you needn't, at least based on my experience. Again, I've only played one of the 4 episodes. I don't know at all what happens in the second episode yet.
What I thought.
So we'll have to see what happens as this goes forward. I am going to play through the second episode of this. You know, the gameplay of this has not been super compelling to me so far, but the gameplay in Telltale titles is not super compelling either. And Batman the Telltale series was my number 10 game of last year, because I don't mind games that are just about walking and talking, as long as, like, I am principally, you guys know me, I'm a mechanics-focused gamer first. I will take quality mechanics over a quality story any day, but that doesn't mean that obviously video games can't tell good stories, or that I can't appreciate a good story in a video game. And that's why I like the Telltale stuff, is their games are usually well written and the stories they tell are usually very interesting. And that's what I hope this one is as well. I don't mind if this, you know, I like an occasional chill experience where it's just, you know, all I need is my mouse hand and I can just click around and talk to people and learn some interesting things and have some interesting conversations and have some interesting intrigues. And it looks like that's what this is both trying to do and will be able to do. I really hope so. Yeah, I mean, Telltale kind of, for the most part, has the market sewn up on the type of games they make. There are a lot more traditional adventure games coming out these days that have a lot of mind-bendy puzzle solving in it. Games that are focused principally on just walking and talking in compelling ways are mostly a Telltale bag now. So if there are other people who can pull that off, then that's a great thing, I think. And I'd like to see more people experiment in that space, which is what Wispfire seems to be doing with this.
But Ian, it's a gift.
So we're hearing these people argue behind a door, so they're all sort of muffled.
I don't need it. I don't need any of this.
I will say that the voice acting of this kid, not my favorite. Definitely not.
Get out. I didn't mean to. Get out.
So as you can see, again, animations, not so hot, right? Yeah. In addition, this ship does have multiple decks, but there definitely aren't. There's only a handful of them, and there aren't very many of them in this first episode. You do not get access to the whole ship here, so that's something to be. That's something to be cognizant of as well. I will say too that, you know, one of the chief criticisms that Telltale games have is that your choices really don't end up mattering that much in the end. The game presents you with a lot of choices, but except for a few key moments, the choices you make always go to the same results anyway. And some of the choices that you make, even some of the big ones, don't really end up amounting to that much. I don't necessarily know where your choices will go in this game in the grand scheme of things. So you see, here's how secondary dialogue works. But I will say that in playing this secondary save I created for recording, I picked very different choices in many cases than I picked when I played the game for real on my real save. And almost everything has happened exactly the same way.
The captain's cabin was strictly
pretty much every piece of dialogue that I've worked with so far, every conversation has ended up in the same place regardless of what I chose. You may get one different reaction line to something, but it hasn't given me any indication that that's going to impact any character relationships or story progression going forward. Now, it might. A lot of the Telltale games will actually pop up a little thing in the corner when you make a major character choice that will go, X person will remember that. This doesn't do that. So who knows? Maybe I'm having more of an impact than I realize. But this may also be a Telltale thing where only certain choices really matter in the grand scheme of things, and you know how big those choices really play into the final game or to the final story arc. That I'm not really sure of. I do think it's a bit of a bait and switch when a game, it makes you think that your choices have real heavy weight and then they don't. I enjoy the Telltale games enough that it hasn't really mattered to me that my choices don't matter that much. But that's something to be cognizant of with this one too. You may not end up with your choices making the impact you wish they did, and you may end up being like, well, if I'm just going to get the same story regardless, then I might as well just watch a let's play of this or something like that. And I can appreciate that. That's not really a big concern for me. I would still prefer to play through this my own way, but you know, it's something for each person to determine on their own based on how they play it. You know, like every character here that I've skipped over talking to, like when I played this the first time, I talked to both Ian and the first officer who was in the room upstairs. I haven't done that yet. I still have the options to, you know, nothing has been taken away from me. Now, in this case, maybe I can call it a night without talking to either of them, and I can. Now, that may have an impact, because the conversations that you have with both Ian and the first officer do have an impact in terms of you establishing a relationship with them, you know, for them to both to get to know you and who you are, and for you to get to know who they are. So maybe if you cut those guys out and just decide to barge on ahead, that would have a big impact. But in that case as well, you're also kind of robbing yourself of some story elements because you're not talking to two critical characters, right?
Boy. Ian.
So, but you see...
Oh, I'm not well, sir.
Yeah, see how rough that animation was there? That's kind of a bummer.
It's probably the food from last night. I don't really feel like eating anything right now.
Oh, really?
So these are two other characters that have a major interaction here, as you can see. Obviously. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of the meat of it. This is what you're seeing here. It's going to be mostly these conversations and the results of that and how that impacts the story. And to what degree it does, I don't know. I will say that most of this first episode is a lot of busy work. It's clearly the game getting you introduced to the different characters and their mindsets and their motivations, and setting things up for what's to come. The episode does end with a major event happening that I will not spoil. So the next one might have a fair bit more intrigue in it. But of course, this is a first impression series, and if you're gonna sit down and put 90 minutes into the first episode, that has to be compelling on its own. I mean, otherwise you're not gonna get much further, right? I will say one thing I would be a little bit concerned about potentially. You guys may know, those of you who've been here for a while, that I tried to do a Let's Play of the episodic Blues and Bullets series a while back. I paid for all 5 episodes of that. I've played 2 of them, and the dev, by all accounts, has gone under, and that series is probably never going to get finished, even though they're still selling it, and they've still got my money. This game, as of right now, does not have a very high player count on Steam. Not a lot of people have bought it, so the other 2 are not out yet. Now, to be fair, unlike Blues and Bullets, this game does not have a season pass. If you put your $10 in right now, you get the first 2 episodes. The other 2 will come later and be charged for separately, so you're not paying in advance for the other 2 episodes. So if for whatever reason they never came to pass, you're not out any money like I was with Blues and Bullets. That is a much better business model, to be sure, but at the same time, that also does get them a little more off the hook if for whatever reason they decide, due to business realities or whatever, not to release the final 2 episodes of this. So I would say you might want to wait for this to come out in full force before you buy it if you have worries about that, because you may end up playing through half of it and then find out that you can't finish it or that you'll never see the end of the story because this wasn't finished. I'm not saying there's any risk of that, but I'm saying that's something to be cognizant of with any piece of episodic content. I mean, Telltale, say what you will about them, and I can say plenty, but when they start a series, they finish it eventually. Smaller indie episodic stuff, maybe not so much in all cases. So, but yeah, I don't want to spoil too much more of this, and I've really given you the meat and potatoes of what the gameplay is. So I think this is interesting. I think the setting is interesting. I think there's some interesting characters and some potential intrigue in here. The production, oh, lovely. I forgot about that bit. I don't think that's how you spell wretch either, but I could be wrong.
Seasick again.
So, such Such lovely sounds. But, yeah. So, you know what you're getting into if you play this game. I think there's some cool elements to it. I think the production values could be a little bit better. But there's something neat here. And I would like to see more games other than Telltale games do this, that attempt this formula and do it well. So, yeah, that is Herald, what was it called again? Herald, an interactive period drama. Yeah, like I said, that title doesn't stick with you. Published and developed by GameWisp in 2017. We are playing this on the PC on Steam. It may be available for Mac and Linux as well. I'm not sure. I should have checked that. It's available for $10 US for the first 2 episodes, and the second 2 will come later and be charged for separately. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, but you obviously have to be into this genre, and you have to be into the setting it presents. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you liked what you saw here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That does help me out a great deal. If you want to watch something else, check out the videos on screen now, and don't forget to follow @PXA Media on Twitter to find out about new stuff first.